In the tradition of Malcolm X, peace be unto you. I want to talk to you about an idea that's been spreading, particularly on the East Coast, for some decades. The idea is that ancient African forms of pagan worship, like ancestral worship, is the way of life of black people in the United States and can save us from white supremacy and ourselves. That belief is being promoted by counterintelligence agents in the black community. Have you ever noticed that most of them don't have a job? Have you ever thought to ask them to see their annual IRS report, which everyone is required to file by law if they are going to claim some form of scholarship or leadership over you? Shouldn't you know the source of their income? Their use of this idea is one of many methods of intellectual suppression among undereducated people like us in the United States. Since slavery, we have been taken advantage of because we were ignorant. We were kept dumb. Remember, we were not even allowed to read books, to learn to read or write, to go to school. And then when we did, of course, we had a far inferior education. Government-paid black counterintelligence operatives have a long history in black communities, especially after the Great Migration of black people into large cities, where we became densely populated in specific areas under redlining. One good example is that of a paid counterintelligence operative or agent who set up Fred Hampton to be murdered in his sleep by Chicago police officers. Like actors, they are taught to never break from the script of their character, no matter what. For them, the ghetto is their stage. They are actors. That means they play their role at all times. Today, such operatives proliferate in the media, on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube. They are used by the power elite to stir the pot of confusion and to dissuade African American youth from using or learning the scientific method, or to simply lead them into ridiculous beliefs and practices that pose no threat to the economic power of the power elite. Sometimes money is their motive. That is, they exploit black people for money. Their goal is to monetize their group. Sometimes their job is simply to promote views opposite to what sincere leaders and thinkers are teaching. Now, Africa is being used by them because of the historical affinity we have to Africa. Consequently, many young African Americans are being misled into forms of paganism. I heard just a few days ago James Small say that the universe is God. That was a ridiculous statement. And at a very elementary level, we know that if it moves, it's not God. Another example is that of the United Nubian Nation of Moors cult leader Dwight Malachi York. I pick him. The 20th century is full of characters like York. He was a counterintelligence agent who misled black people. He used the historical African connection as bait on his cult hook to catch his prey. He was sentenced to 125 years in prison for child abuse, for pedophilia. Here's the point I want to make about adapting African pagan religions. Paganism won't work to deliver us from what afflicts us any more than Eurocentric forms of Christianity. It will only increase your ignorance and suffering. You can't go backward to paganism and expect to move forward into science at the same time, because paganism is anti-logic. That is their goal, to make you as irrational and superstitious as possible. Their game is a war for your mind. And more importantly, more specifically, your subconscious mind, to degrade it, to stunt your growth, and to exploit you economically, or just simply to neuter you. Africa is a landmass. It is land, a continent, among many continents in the world. Over large spans of geological time, it will break up into pieces, as it is doing. Each piece will float away from the others, because change is a continuous process, and we are part of that process. And if we live in denial that change is that process, and that the only thing constant in this natural world, in this natural universe, is change, then we will be stunted as long as our group exists. Africa, its dirt, its waters, and vegetation does not inherit any mystical or divine significance whatsoever. No place on earth nor any other planet does. It is impossible for African Americans to have a deep sentiment for Africa because we were not born and raised there. Remember, Africa was full of animals before we evolved into Homo sapiens there. Thus, it does not deserve to be worshiped by me or anyone else. And anyone who promotes that idea is either a deceiver or stupid. Since we did not originate in Africa, it is not our motherland. Descendants of slavery were born here, in the Americas, in the United States for the most part, for better or for worse. Africa is composed of about 52 or so nations and countless tribes and families. You and I do not belong to any of those tribes because we do not speak the languages nor share the unique histories and most of the cultural values practiced by African tribes. Yes, genetically, we are descended from African people, but besides being genetically connected, we have been culturally severed from African people for over 400 years. That is too long a span of time. We have been swept away from Africa forever. Our ancestors do not live in us symbolically, subconsciously. We do not remember those who were from Africa, those who were kidnapped. We have no recollection of them. We have no pictures of our family members, those from whom we are descended from that time. We do not possess their worldview because it was not written down by them for us to keep. Our minds were spawned here in the United States That is the historical and social fact. Our minds were empty of an African identity after 2 generations from the first boatload of real Africans brought into the colonies. Now we speak a European language, and we eat European food for the most part. We dress and aspire to be accepted by European people. We were and are forcibly assimilated, yes, against our free will, but we are assimilated nevertheless. And even more so today, we willingly bend a knee to European customs. Most of you celebrated Christmas, a holiday that even Christians know is a farce. You imbibed alcohol, you smoked marijuana, and you watched football. That's the American way. Even if only by habit, we are driven by powerful counterintelligence riptides in the United States. We were educated within Eurocentric institutions to participate within their symbolic collective subconscious. Proof of that is that most Africans now speak and write European, Arab, and now Chinese languages because most African cultures did not develop a written language in their indigenous language. Therefore, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years, except for ancient Egypt and Abyssinia, that is called Ethiopia today, you can't find a single book, a single written language in sub-Saharan Africa. Not one. So they too have lost the cultural war, the war for the minds of the people. Once severed from it, it is impossible to regain authentic culture as it was. I've said many times, you cannot step twice into the same river. African religions are pagan or naturalistic superstitions. Some literally worship dead body parts. Some cut the hands off of albinos. Such beliefs do not dispose a person or group to the discipline of logical thinking and science. African people lost because they were superstitious and living in an area of the world that was a backwater, and you will lose and lose and lose, and your mind will be in a mental backwater if you follow that path. A backwater is a pool of still water, water that does not flow. Cultural diffusion stimulates social growth. Now, because African cultures did not participate on the dynamic trade routes, they were not exposed to new sciences. They could not keep up with the latest developments. Separated too long from the many technological changes taking place in other parts of the world, they thus fell quickly, as Native Americans fell here in North America and South America. Even ancient Egypt eventually fell before it could penetrate sub-Saharan Africa. It couldn't keep up demographically. It fell behind in military technology. It suffered climatic catastrophe between 1100 and 1200 BC, and it became politically unstable. Consequently, Kemet was stripped of its sciences and became a food cupboard for the Persian, Greek, and Roman empires. But we must give a standing ovation to Kemet because it did last over 3,000 years. The burden is now on us to not only survive, but to also create a good culture for ourselves. That is the power we did inherit. It is not tied to any land. It is the transcendental power of our minds to think logically and to create, whether we are standing still or on the run on the square. So far, and the facts substantiate what I'm about to tell you. So far, we are failing to do that everywhere in the Americas. Even the Haitians cannot organize their nation. A nation of black people cannot organize their nation and defend it from American and European exploiters. There is no ancestral cosmic welfare. I am Dr. Stephen Nur Ahmed. Peace be unto you.